was filled with the cruel smell of bleach and other cheap detergents. You walked, with mop in hand, through the halls of the old opera house, dragging a trolley of grey water behind you. If someone asked why you were treading on ground, you'd say, "Well, I'm just double checking if I've properly cleaned this area." Not that anyone ever asked. In reality, you were just severely bored with your job, wasting time. They'll probably fire you soon. What's the point of putting in effort? You heard a noise resonating through the termite-ridden walls. Warm and soft, like a kiss from a lover. Nothing out of the usual, just late performance. The building often gets rented out to debuting artists. Those unfortunate souls, they think they have a life ahead of them. Most will just end up like you. A roar threw you out of your thought of the rent being due next week. Just an applause, nothing special. As confirmation, you could hear clearly as people got up from their seats and rushed the artists while cheering. Rush the artist. No, that makes no sense. Those rhythmic stomps must have been many people clapping at once. Makes much more sense. You gulped lightly as you heard something slam against the door to your right. Just someone who was in a rush and forgot to open the door. You let go of the wood trolley and place your mop in it. Facing the door, you suddenly hear no sound at all. Weird, you thought. There was, of course, nothing to worry about. It was just, you step towards the door as your stomach curdles up. You fixate on the door. You can see camp fog slowly seeping out from below it. Ah, of course. Must just be a spill in the auditorium. Nothing to get worried about. Your hands clench the door handle so hard your damp hands seize up, jerking the door open. The room was wide and circular, with only a single skylight illuminating the middle. The slightly elevated stage where all budding artists could try their luck for that hour in the limelight. The chairs all over were wooden and as old as the building itself. These rotting carcasses found comfort in the dry company of their mummified occupants, just as dead and lifeless as the reception of you. About a dozen of the more aware witnesses were piled up in front of you, reaching towards the door before they were cut off, as if their lives were severed right then and there. Gemfog bellowed forth from the beating heart of the room. Its beautiful golden hue had so far prevented your mind from describing the thing at the center. It was a harp, coated in a furious gold that claimed the eyes and took them forever hostage. Its perfect contours broken only by its shattered side. A crack, long, random, and outwards facing, revealing a slender broken bow in the harp's innards. A sleeping eye whimpered slowly at the top of the harp, claiming a spot all for itself. It had 9 strings, 4 to the right and 4 to the left, with one brazen red rope in the middle. A lifeless human hand held this passionately and with much gusto, ready to play the day away. The body connected to the arm was lifeless, cold, mummified the same as the air in your lungs. A clear definition of the body was impossible, as if the heart prevented it by its will for you to stare at it, and only it. fingers played on your spine like a xylophone as your mind came to its senses from these year-long moments of observation. You had not gone far into the room. You could just leave. Close the door behind you. Just back off slowly. Your heart beat out of your chest as you silently backed off without stepping on anything. But it seems those beats alone were loud enough. The harp animated with unmatched ferocity as you turned to run as fast as you can. You could hear the body begin playing a beautiful tune, only in discord when the harp smashed into piles of corpses and the wall, neither of which slowed him down any. You ran as fast as you could, no longer feeling anything in your body. Your lungs are pincushions used by whatever ethereal fate had decided your strings to be cut this day. As you felt the last of your strength leave you, your deathly curiosity made you peek behind you. The harp smashed holes into either wall as it was barely a meter behind you, but before your brain could understand anything else, you were nothing but a red spot, an afterthought on the harp-sized hole in the wall. If you still had any soul intact after that, it surely watched the harp slow down and turn to the revolving doors of the entrance, ready to continue outside. Alright, so what the fuck was that? Well, the idea for a champion that's been hounding me for a good month or so. Accurately, I guess. But why is the bloody harp and why does the title state it's a Darkin? Well, for my philosophy behind it, you'll have to wait, as first I want to talk about what he actually does in-game, because I feel that's the most important, no matter what flavor your champion is. For now, need a working name for it other than harp, but there isn't really a naming convention for Darkin because there's so few of them. The most you could say is that they have two A's in their name, but then verse throws a wrench in that, so I guess I'll call him Gary for now, with two A's. Now, I'm aware this video won't be all that to look at, but unfortunately while graphic design is my passion, I think you'd rather it wasn't. The main idea for Gary's gameplay is to combine the brutality of a Darkin with the musicality of, well, a harp. And as music means slows or speed ups in this game, and this harp is a selfish prick, we will be combining brute strength with a ton of slows. His job will be to disrupt the enemy and screw over their engages. He will be a perfect guy to stall for objectives with. Let's start with his passive, Momentum. The harp gains stacks of momentum as it travels, gaining out of combat movement speed. Whenever this ability reaches 100 stacks, the next 4 abilities or auto attacks that hit champions will slow them by a percentage based on level, up to a maximum of 50% for each enemy champion. It's here I'd like to mention that I imagine this guy being a support jungler hybrid, building either tank or bruiser dependent on which role he plays. And this mini mobility boots and the slows of his passive will help him in ganking as both lanes. His Q is called Solo. Gary hits on a small arc in front of him, slowing all enemies hit by 80% plus passive, decaying quickly. If this ability doesn't hit a champion, it can be recast to fire a flurry of musical notes in a pattern similar to Graves' auto attack with a bit more range. The point of this ability is to either practically root someone or to disrupt multiple people, but for less, as the ranged Q doesn't have a slow beyond the passive. The projectiles don't penetrate and probably deal reduced damage to minions. And this ability can be cast either form while moving. I won't talk exact numbers in this video because damage numbers are a mystery to me in this game. For example, Rumble's Q's base damage and scaling are both fucking insane, while Lux's V, which is probably one of the worst shields in the game, has awful base and scaling. So, I have no idea how this game works, apparently. Let's skip over his V for now and talk about his signature ability. Similar in purpose to Leone, No Q or Trash Q, and importantly YQ and Haka E. Rampage makes him travel in a line at set speed, unaffected by speed effects. Enemy champions will be pulled along with him, only able to escape it by dashing or flashing. However, any champion not currently being pulled can CC him, which will stop his E instantly. Same if he hits a wall. This ability is meant to be his bread and butter. A high cooldown CC nightmare, but one which can't be used as brainlessly as Blitz or Now Q. It's very similar to Alistair's headbutt, and it can very easily screw over your team by taking the enemies away from the people who actually deal damage. But again, just like Olivi, it can be insanely useful to just grab the car away from your carry. And it's also less likely to fuck you over because, well, if you smack someone into a wall, then they're not gonna fly over it. Unless, they flash also. The passive stacks will be applied along with the periodic damage of the ability. And this ability can be cancelled anytime. Now to wrap up the basic abilities. His W, Discordant Symphony, projects an aura of slow around him, along with a damage over time effect. It's a pretty simple tool for him to stick to people while waiting on his cooldowns, but the upside of this ability is that it can be cast no matter what. Now, the aura and the damage isn't the best, but the fact it's basically always gonna be active and constantly slowing people, even if he's in Zonya, being revived or anything else in between, is definitely worth something. Also, it does not apply his passive because it would probably waste it. If you're in that range, you can just auto attack. Now for the finale, which I have two flavors for, but their function is the same. Gary smacks the ground in front of him in a sweet spot smaller than Lilia's W, dealing insane damage to no one, cause how the fuck could you land that without actually having Lilia on your team too? From the spot, a ring of Chemfog bellows forth, in an area similar in size to Vigar's E. All of his basic abilities gain additional attributes while he stands in fog, and enemies are slowed by it for 20%, which is separate from his passive. The fog lasts 30 seconds, expanding by a bit every time a champion does, also increasing its duration by 10% for every champion death. And yes, that includes your allies. So even if you get 4 inbred sea monkeys, at least their deaths will be worth something. To balance this, and the fact I haven't even told you about those ability upgrades, if Gary dies, the fog will dissipate instantly, and the ultimate will also not lose cooldown time while it is active and has a pretty high cooldown to begin with. Meaning, if the enemy is fast enough to force another engagement while it's still on cooldown, poor old Gary might not be able to use it there at all. His Q's swing roots enemies and applies the slow afterwards, while his ranged counterpart pierces enemies and always applies the passive slow, even if it shouldn't be active. Pierce projectiles deal no damage to minions, but they do still damage epic monsters. His V aura becomes bigger and the dots last twice as long. He also gains a temporary shield based on the level of his W when he uses R. The shield here is for a bit of durability. It shouldn't get out of hand until late game, or if he's a support, well, it never will, because the game will end when he's level 14 max. His E only has a simple change. If started in or goes through the Chemfog, it will gain Unstoppable. Simple yet deadly, eh? Before we move on, I wanted to reflect a little on the ultimate. While I wanted it to be strong, game-changing even, I didn't want it to make up the binary thing like with poor old Yorick, where you 1v1 someone with ult, you win, and if you don't or have R, you just lose. Therefore, while the fog gives him a shit ton of utility, it doesn't actually increase his damage for the most part. Of course, the pierce on his range Q and the W duration will increase damage dealt, but it won't be as significant a difference as for someone like Yorick, Heimerdinger, or even Nasus. Now, let's get into the flavor of the champion. Walk cycle, voice lines, lore, and all the rest. As for his personality, 90% of it should be carried by his walk cycles and auto attacks. For his walk cycles, he would basically jump, like hop around fast, and would pull the body along with him, and the body would be playing a tune all the while. Unless, of course, he's speed boosted, in which case he's almost flying with really big but less frequent jumps, and the body will be pulled along, holding on for dear life with one hand to the red string, and just waving in the wind like a flag. Now, for the auto attacks themselves, I have had issues explaining how I want them to look. But if you'd imagine swinging a baseball bat, now imagine the baseball bat is swinging itself and you're holding on to it. So it looks like you're swinging it, but you're just a puppet being pulled along by the bat. I want something similar for his auto attacks here. It basically drags you along with it, just like his walk cycle. I hope that makes sense. Now, I don't have a good idea for criticals, but something silly, like the body of the puppet being used as the attacking object, would be good, because he's not going to build criticals anyway. So you're not going to see it very rarely, so it might as well be funny. His silhouette should be really easy to distinguish, as he's very rectangular and elongated shaped. So it should stand out among the more humanoid appearance of a lot of the other champions. And as for the voice lines, it should be unbridled rage, similar to his brother Aatrox, although it should lean more towards the insane than the angry. Throw in a few lines from the puppet's torment, and you should be as good as they. He also hates art, like a lot. So any champions who are art, like Galio, or who make things or art, like Heimerdinger or Sona, should be the people he's even more angry at. Now for his lore. The gist of it is that someone with a lot of money couldn't play any instruments, but wanted to be a famous musician. He blamed his ineptitude on his instruments and set out to create a harp worthy of his skills, non-existent as they may be. He came across a Darkin bow, I'm thinking through an auction or something similar, and decided it would be the perfect basis for it. Using machines, he broke the bow really sodding hard and put it into the harp. He then went to play it to a crowd without using the red string, and it sounded absolutely beautiful. And emboldened by this, he decided to use the ranked string for the finale, killing him instantly and finally merging with the Darkin. But because of poor old Gary's state, all that happened was that his corpse and soul were forever trapped holding the red string. Gary, meanwhile, who had gone through immense torture and who was finally denied his freedom, maybe permanently, became a bit of a nutter. Not a nice guy to hang about, and chill, you might say, and decided that he'll get revenge on all artists and destroy every piece of art he comes across in a similar way to Pike, adding shit to his list as he notices they exist. Now I'm thinking for this, one of his control 1, 2, 3 animations would be just him finding a pile of books or something, and it just goes ham on them, absolutely crazily. You could make him a lot like Viger, but he's kind of scary, but at the same time he's kind of funnily scary. Just some food for thought. I guess this entire video is that. Now, I am not a lore buff, by a long shot, so you can definitely say...
That's not how it works. That's not how any of this works.
And that's fine. The original concept for this was more in line with a demon like Fiddlesticks. The reason I've changed it to a Darkin is because we have so few of them. We only have one musical champion, and one that's just her, but again. And we only have, 3 Darkins so far? And I feel like they have themes and ideas that could be used and explored that get thrown in the garbage for Pretty Woman or Subway Surfer character. Oh yeah, and before I go, I mentioned I had 2 ideas for the ultimate. One was as I described and would be called Dance Macabre. I know, very original. While the other was slightly different. Instead of just smacking the ground, Gary would pull the body above his head and then stomp the corpse into mush, completely freeing himself for the duration of his ultimate. The rest would be the same, of course, but the name of the ability would change to Death of the Author, which I thought would be neat and brutal. Also, yes, Death of the Author is mainly a writing concept. I know your education was very expensive. So, that about covers it. If you made it this far without falling asleep, thank you. If this video gets positive reception, I have a second idea for a more solar themed champion. And for once, I would appreciate if you pass this video to others. I want to hear as many opinions on it as I can, even if it's negative. Tell me, is it stupid? What you change about it? If it makes no sense, or even if my little writing splurge was impressive or good to listen to at the start. Either way, thank you for watching and take care, loves.